USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. One of the most anticipated matchups in the early hockey season has to be what's going on this weekend as Northeastern and Providence have a home-and-home series.
And joining us now on the Game of the Week podcast, a longtime hockey scribe. He covered the Providence Friars, Brown University for years for the Providence Journal, and now you'll find his byline pretty much everywhere, and that is Mark Divver. Mark, great to see you, great to talk to you, and take me through Providence. They've had a nice year to start. I don't know if it's an above expectations year or meets expectations below, but I look at their product on the ice, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I would say it's slightly above expectations. They, they've got some. They had the win against Denver was really something that stands out. Coming from 3 goals down in the third period, but they, it's kind of a different team than I think the last few years. I think there's more skill in the bottom 6. Maybe more skill overall than the last few PC teams. They're not having the scoring issues that they've had in the past at times. We'll see if that continues, but they've had good scoring balance, good goaltending. The defense is really strong. And they've played, I don't want to say they've played a weak schedule, but they've played some teams here that you would not put in the top echelon of college hockey, and they've beaten them, which if you're going to play those guys, you got to beat them, and they've done that.
You mentioned goaltending, and, I think when Providence is up, they've got great goaltending. When they're struggling and down, it seems like that might be the area that always suffers the most. What have you seen from the growth of Jackson Stauber in that?
Well, he's I would call him a bend, don't break goalie. He gave up 5 against Denver, but they won 6-5. He clamped down when the game was really on the line, and he's had a few of those where he gives up some goals, but then he makes a couple big saves down the stretch, and they pull out the win. So I think he's progressed as far as being able to do that. Last year, maybe those games would have gotten away from them, and they would have lost. But I would say he's making, pretty steady progress this season.
A couple of sophomores lead the team in scoring right now, Brett Berard, Nick Poisson. And I remember seeing, Berard was so highly touted coming into his freshman year. I guess I was watching out for him. Did not know a lot about Poisson. And then watching him in person a couple of times last year, very impressed with the skate, his ability to skate, his ability to distribute the puck, and just, overall offensive drive. What do you see from a player like him? Well,
he's a playmaking winger more than a sniper, which I guess you could say Berard is more of a sniper. But yeah, you're right. He's a very good player. Under the radar a little bit, maybe going into this season, but I know he's starting to attract some attention as an undrafted player. I think a year from now will really be his sweet spot as a free agent going forward. But he's been really good, and has helped contribute to that scoring balance that I alluded to earlier. And Berard, last year he was a young kid playing against older guys, and that showed at times. This year, I think he's a year older. He put in the work over the summer. He's having a very impressive season. This has been pointed out by other people, but there's some Brad Marchand in his game, in the fact that he's very, very much an agitator. Not afraid to give somebody the stick if he feels the need, but a positive all the time on the team as far as leading the attack, energy, all those things. He scored some big goals and made some big time plays for them this year so far.
I'll ask you about Brett Berard a little further, just the fact that he's going to the World Junior Camp and with his head coach, Nate Lehman, who obviously won gold last year with the U.S. This has become a nice little tradition for Providence that there's some impact on the World Junior stage, on the biggest stage. Yeah, at least having the coach there is big, but then you put a player like Berard in there as well.
Yeah, and he wasn't just along for the ride last year. He was a very important player on their I forget if it was the third or the fourth line with Farinacci and I think Bobby Brink. They really contributed to that gold medal with their energy and their speed. But yeah, you're right. Even going back to John Gillies played in the World Juniors at Providence, and there have been others. It's a nice little streak that they have going here, and those kids have earned it. It's not because the coach is there, and he's picking his guys. I don't think it works that way with the World Juniors. You gotta pick your best team. But it's been nice to see those guys and have them contribute to the U.S. success over the last few years.
Mark, when we look at the other side of the matchup, we've got Northeastern, and in particular, people are making note of Devin Levi, .950 save percentage, 1.43 goals against. Northeastern's only scoring 2.5 goals a game, but they've had such a stingy goaltending. How huge is Levi in this? Is he going to steal them a few games and maybe even this weekend?
That could very well happen. He's taken them on his back the last couple of weekends. They are in the middle of just a brutal run of injuries and sickness. That's going to continue this weekend. I talked to Jerry Keefe last night, and he's not expecting any of his injured guys back. He may get back some guys who were sick, but there's a run of illness going through the team, so there may be other guys sick. But Levi has been unbelievable. And going back to the World Juniors last year, we saw what he was capable of for Canada. I mean, I believe he was selected as the best goalie in the tournament, even though he played on the silver medal team. His numbers are unbelievable. And Jerry raves about the kid, the personality that he has, and he's a great teammate. He's popular with his teammates. He's not a guy who, I'm familiar with some goalies in the past who never let in a bad goal. It was never their fault when one went in. And Levi's not that guy. He's a team first kid. And, I wasn't aware that he was a Vermont commit before he went to Northeastern. But boy, they really got a great one there. And he's, I don't know what trophy he's going to win this year. It's early to talk about trophies, but he's going to get some kind of hardware, whether it's from Hockey East or, a national award, if he keeps this up. So this weekend, Providence is healthy. Northeastern is not. It's going to be, if they can pull one out or two, it's going to be because of Devin Levi, I believe.
Yeah, where I live in Buffalo Sabres land, the fans would love to have him right now. How depleted is Northeastern? How many players are they going to be missing?
Well, they were missing 5 regular players last on Sunday. I believe one of them was sick. The Jackson twins, Sam Colangelo, Riley Hughes, those guys are injured. I don't know who's sick or who isn't sick, but even those 4, those are 4 top 6 forwards. So they're a deep team. They have a deep roster, but asking a kid to come in and replace those guys is a tall order.
You mentioned that Providence being a healthy team, they should hold an upper hand going into this weekend against Northeastern. When Providence is doing things well, what do you feel like their game looks like?
Well, they play hard, they play heavy, they're very structured. This year their power play is second in the country. So they've been able to capitalize when they get a power play chance, which obviously is pivotal. But they're a Nate Lehman team, so the style of play doesn't change. They play hard. They don't give up much. To the other team. It's pretty much more of the same from the Nate Lehman style team.
It should be an exciting series this weekend, and we look forward to following the long 2-game series between Providence and Northeastern. Mark Divver, if you don't follow Mark Divver on Twitter, follow him. 2 V's in there, at Mark Divver, Divver, but I don't know a man that probably sees more hockey in a given season, especially out here in Hockey East World, than Mark does. So good follow, great guy. We appreciate you stopping by and taking some time today.
Thanks, Jimmy. Anytime.
More of the Game of the Week podcast coming up.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Interesting matchup this weekend with Northeastern and Providence, and the illnesses and injury at Northeastern really put a bit of a twist on it if you're trying to prognosticate what's going to happen this weekend.
And those names that Mark Divver mentioned for players that are out, Colangelo, both Jacksons, Riley Hughes, those are massive players in the Northeastern University lineup. That's your offensive heart, really. There's some players like Aiden McDonough and Jack Hughes that are healthy, and you've had guys like Tupani, who I think started on the 4th line this year, and he's kind of moved himself up, but that's really tough to be in that position so early in the season. But you got to hope that none of these injuries are long-term. And the good thing is for most of these coaches, you're heading toward a break. So if you can get through a couple of weeks, usually you're going to be in a position to get some of these bodies back.
With Devin Levi in net for Northeastern, can the Huskies play a more defensive style and just try to limit opportunities for Providence?
Certainly, but he's proven that if you leave him out to dry, just like any other goaltender, the goals will go in. He's had a few, he's had a lot of shutouts this year. By my count, I think it's 4 thus far already. Plus, he even in an exhibition game, he didn't let up a goal. But he's had some games. Five goals against Boston College, 5 goals against UConn, and there might have been some empty netters in there. I can't remember, so maybe it's not exactly 5, but. Besides that, though, the numbers are unreal, and he's playing extremely well, high save percentage. So he's stopping the pucks that he can see. You gotta be careful. You just said it, you have to play that defensive style.
Let's stay in Hockey Eastland with number 14 Massachusetts, number 15 UMass Lowell, a home-and-home series. They play Friday night at Lowell. Depletion is the story again with UMass, as they have a number of players out of the lineup. They're so short on players that they've got a couple of defensemen at forward. What do things look like for Greg Carville's team? Is this going to be a rough weekend for the Minutemen?
I mean, it's possible, but, they had this situation 2 weeks ago against UNH. They were missing, I believe, 4 or 5 forwards. And, they're going to be in a position that is going to be similar this week. But I do think that this is a team that has some depth to it. And they've got guys that'll step up and play. This has become a nice little rivalry series. And talking to Greg Carville yesterday, he said it was kind of on UMass to make it a rivalry. When he got to UMass, this was a team that was nowhere in a contention to be a nationally ranked team. And 2 years ago was the first time ever that Lowell and UMass played each other nationally ranked. They'll do so again this weekend. These games become heavyweight, and both of these schools take them pretty seriously these days.
Well, let's stay out east to a big ECAC matchup, and that's number 9 Cornell coming in at 8-1, visiting number 18 Clarkson. We talked earlier in the week in TMQ online at USCHO that Cornell may be kind of an underappreciated team. Number 9 is still pretty high. They're only at number 20 in the pairwise, but it sounds like Mike Schaefer has a different look to his Cornell Big Red this season.
Well, I'll tell you, he has to be pretty proud of himself for putting forward a pretty good team to this point. They lost, they were depleted during that COVID year where they didn't play, had some players transfer out, some big name players transfer out. So I think of their ability to bounce back and, start this season off as hot as they have, really quality. And now he'll get a big test with Clarkson. And that'll be a very tough series, a tough weekend, Clarkson and St. Lawrence in the same weekend. But I look at this, Clarkson team too, as a team that if they're playing their best hockey, they're one of the best in the ECAC. And I think that is, when we think of Casey Jones and his team up there, they're looking for consistency at this point.
Well, let's go to the Big Ten. Number 11, Minnesota at number 3, Michigan. Michigan had a pretty big scoring weekend hosting Niagara last weekend. Minnesota, a 5-1 win over North Dakota on Friday night in non-league play as they renewed that rivalry. And then they came pretty close to coming back in a 3-2 loss on Saturday. The Golden Gophers have been up and down, a little inconsistent this season, and Michigan seems to be a better team on the road. What do we look for this weekend with this matchup?
Well, I think for Minnesota, you've got to get the emotion of last weekend out of it and realize you're back in conference play. And this is a big series against arguably the best team in your conference. These are the two teams that the coaches picked preseason to be number 1 and number 2. I think that you get back on even keel. Last week was a little bit of a different series because you're playing in North Dakota, but just get back on even keel and play good hockey. That's really what it's about at this point for Minnesota. And then Michigan, it's do more of the same, and do it on the road. You heard Mel Pearson a few weeks ago when we talked to him. We talked about the distractions that you can sometimes experience at home. And that has been, maybe the only kryptonite this team has found because everything else, when they've been on the road, they're perfect. So they're going to look to continue that this weekend. We'll see how that goes.
You got to wonder what kind of distractions there were last Saturday after the Wolverines beat Ohio State on the gridiron. That must have been just a zoo in Ann Arbor that night.
I would think so. I think that these programs tend to pull for one another, and they go out and find the same spirit that every other college kid on that campus goes through. And it had been so long since they'd won that matchup in football against Ohio State. So I'm sure there was a lot of fun, but this is, I think, you also hear about Mel Pearson about how he has to focus this team. And I think he does a really good job of getting this team prepped night in, night out. And I think that those emotions, as much as you want to be a college kid, you're a college student, I think, when you play for Mel Pearson, but you're a hockey player. And that's, a very big difference.
A big matchup in the NCHC. Brett Larson's St. Cloud State Huskies have had 2 weeks to focus on this weekend after getting swept on the road at Western Michigan. They take on North Dakota, which split, as we mentioned, at home with Minnesota. This is a very big weekend for St. Cloud State, maybe even bigger than it is for North Dakota, though every weekend's big in that conference.
Yeah, this is kind of the end of that gauntlet that Brett Larson had talked to us about on a previous podcast, that it was, 6 games against really big, heavy teams, the toughest teams they play all year. And he said if we could get 2/3 of the points, that would be fine. Well, the first weekend they got 4 points out of 6. Then the second weekend, 0. That donut, and that's a tough weekend to swallow. So I think you're trying to get back, but the one team in the NCHC besides maybe St. Cloud that you don't want to try to bounce back against is North Dakota. That's not a team that's going to lose back-to-back games very often. I think that they're well coached, and they you look at their record off of a loss in recent years is excellent. They don't get into losing streaks. The Fighting Hawks, they know how to rebound after a loss. So I don't know that a sweep is in the order for either of these teams. But you hope as a coach. I think they're not going to. St. Cloud will not get those 2/3 of the points out of the 6-game stretch. But you're just hoping minimum 3, get 4. That would be nice. You'd love love to get 6, but that's unrealistic almost.
We talked earlier in the week on another podcast about how the season is quite a grind. These are 5 grind matchups this weekend.
They are. I think they are. And it's when I look at the commissioners and the schedulers of these, putting these in this same weekend, it's all after Thanksgiving. So you've mostly had some non-conference play. You're bouncing back into your conference. You really probably only have after this one weekend left, if you have that, left in your schedule. So you look at this weekend and you kind of circle it because you've got a hard opponent for all 10 of these teams that we've just mentioned, real hard opponents, but they're big games and they set a tone for your second half. You're going to only get maybe 4 more games before the end of the first half, and then you got to take that 20-something day break. You want to be able to go into that with momentum. So that starts this weekend, maybe continues next weekend for most of these teams. But you've got to be thinking. You got to be thinking that this is kind of the downhill slide, and you want momentum as you head into the second half.
Well, for more on all these matchups, including some odds-making detail and how our 10 Division I columnists see these games panning out this weekend, check out our USCHO Bettor's Edge column on Friday for more detail. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.